Riot has officially announced the new season of competitive Valorant, and they are not messing around. We have been talking for months about the huge changes that will shape Valorant forever, and now we finally have some details. Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, this video is brought to you by our friends over at Elgato. As you guys can tell, I just moved, and honestly the easiest part of moving was setting up all of my Elgato products like the mic arm, the lights, the mic. So a huge thank you and shout out to them. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you know I've been making lots of videos regarding the future of Valorant, specifically competitive professional Valorant and what Riot has planned for future VCT events. Back in April, Riot announced changes that would be occurring within the Valorant competitive scene. In Riot's Valorant Partnership announcement, they said, for 2023, we will select partner teams across our 3 international leagues who have a track record of building great esports experiences, developing players, and can meaningfully contribute to the long-term growth of Valorant esports. To make sure we attract the best teams in the world, we will forego any participation/franchising fees and instead provide financial stipends to the selected teams in return for their investment in growing the ecosystem. We knew these partner teams would be competing in their own leagues, but we really didn't know what these leagues would look like until now. In their press release, Riot showed a pretty little graphic demonstrating what the competitive year will look like. Now, Riot put out a whole load of information, so we have broken it down to make it a little more digestible. Let's take a look at what a typical year would look like for Valorant fans. The season will start off with 2 international splits. These will be played on LAN in 3 cities for each of their respective international regions: Los Angeles for the Americas, Berlin for EMEA, and Seoul for the Pacific. The first split will usually start in February, but be replaced only in 2023 with a kickoff tournament, which we'll get to later. The second split will then begin around March or April, and both will last for 8 weeks. These splits will be the bread and butter regular games, similar to the splits that League of Legends has currently. Then in May, we'll have Masters in much the same form we're used to. The top teams from each of the 3 regions will compete for a title and limited spots to qualify directly for champions. Around June and July, we'll see the start of the last chance qualifiers, which many of you are familiar with as the final opportunity for teams to snag a single spot at Champions. And then Champions, the pinnacle of Valorant's calendar, will run from August to September. Everything we've just covered will apply to the International League and their partner teams. What about teams that aren't partnered? Well, that's where the Challengers League comes in. This will run concurrently and also have 2 regular splits. One will begin in January and the other in March, culminating in June's Ascension Tournament. The Ascension Tournament will happen the same time as the last chance qualifiers and will give the best non-partner teams a chance to move up into the international leagues. Okay, so remember how I mentioned that one-off tournament for the International League? Well, it's going to take place of the first international split, but only for 2023. The winner of this tournament will also get an extra slot at Masters for their region. It will be held in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and Riot said it will be the largest tournament in VCT history, running for 3 weeks from February to early March. So this is all a lot of new fun stuff. A lot of Valorant fans are wondering how this will all go down. Are these changes good for Valorant? With Valorant having partner teams applying and then being accepted into these spots, some people, including myself, were a bit worried that these teams would just sort of coast and not work on improving themselves. If that sounds weird, think about it this way. You know, in college in the States, when seniors apply to college early decision and they get in and they just kind of coast and do nothing for the rest of the school year? Kind of like that. Like, they don't have to worry about the rest of their grades. They're in. In Valorant's case, if teams can't be relegated, they don't have to worry about being kicked from the program. They can do the bare minimum and coast. Is this a likely reality? Well, Valorant fans, we have a case study not too far from here. Riot's other major game, League of Legends, have had a partner system like Valorant's proposed one since 2017. But as Wetselaar graciously explains, based on League of Legends, that is not most likely going to be the outcome.
Anybody who's running an esports org cares about winning, obviously. So teams are incentivized to continue to try to win because they need to bring in sponsorship money. They want to make sure they have fans. All of these things are tied to an organization's financial well-being. So winning still matters, of course, even if there's not this immediate threat of your team literally being ripped out of the league.
Something I had feared once the changes were announced was the financial aspect of the VCT. There are stipends, aka money, being given to teams rather than them having to worry about buy-ins, which means teams do not have to pay for their spot. While that could help organizations with the financial burden of running a team, isn't all as cut and dry as it may seem.
So the only cost of running an esports team is not the franchise fees, right? You've got player salaries, you've got staff, in a lot of cases, you've got training facilities. All of these things cost money. And esports organizations are a fairly new business in the grand scheme of the entertainment industry. So each of these teams needs to find their own business model. But if Valorant salaries get to the kind of astronomical highs that we've seen in more established games like League of Legends or CSGO, and you get to a point where players are being paid hundreds of thousands, in some cases millions of dollars a year in salary to play on these teams, those teams need a way to recoup that money. And surely some of that has to come through this partnership with Riot. I think it's a positive change overall that teams aren't having to buy in. I think that in the scope of esports, we've seen some reported franchise fees that to me are honestly a little bit ridiculous. So I think this is the right move from Riot in terms of Valorant esports, but it doesn't remove the financial burden of operating an esports team. It just removes this one slice of those expenses.
My personal view on all of this is cautious optimism. I am more hopeful for the future of the esport now that there is a somewhat, I guess, completely finalized structure with the partner teams and the challengers teams. However, we still aren't super sure what that tier 2 scene will look like in terms of participants, since more and more teams are still leaving the esport. I know there is the Challengers League and the tournaments that we will finally have the information about, but can you blame me for still being hesitant about what tier 2 will look like? I've expressed my fears about how Riot will handle tier 2 before, and I'm not the type to throw up my hands in the air and say, well, they must have fixed it. I also still have questions about how the Challengers Ascension and Partner program will work together. I reached out to Riot for comment about the possibility of relegation, but at the time of recording this, they have not gotten back to me. What I am excited about are those inter-regional matches. It will be so cool to see NA face off against LATAM with these international splits. So all I can do is wait and cross my fingers. But at last, the final pieces of the puzzle are coming together for the future of Valorant. And soon we won't even have to say the future. It will be the here and the now. I finally got my D&D dice. I got them here. I got my player, I don't know if you can see it. So it's behind my chair. I got my player's handbook. I got my dice bag. I'm ready, gamers. I got my Vax and my Percy Funko Pops. If you know, you know. I'm so excited and it'll be good. I'm back, baby. Cleric Main Liz is back.